Good afternoon. We will be presenting to you the lesson today on writing equations and parallel and perpendicular lines, A through 10. In this video, we are going to explain how to either develop the equation or how to find the equation based off a graph and based off of a given equation with in slope-intercept form. Now, when we're looking at parallel slopes will have the same slope as the given equation. For example, let's take a look at the equation y is equal to 2/3 x plus 6. If I'm concentrating on the slope, let's think about slope-intercept form. Slope-intercept form is y is equal to mx plus b. Therein lies, these are matching up. These are matching up, and these are matching up, just so we can see what goes with what. So the slope here in this line is going to be 2/3. And by definition, it tells us that the parallel line has the same slope. So if I were to develop a new equation using the information in the given, that would give me y is equal to 2/3 x. So my slope will still end up being the same because it is a parallel slope. On the other hand, we're going to now take a look at perpendicular slope. Let's see if we can think, before we go on, about the difference between parallel and perpendicular. Give you a moment to get your thoughts together. Okay, now, looking at perpendicular slope, if we look further and think about our definition of perpendicular slope, we are looking at the opposite reciprocal of a given slope. What do we mean by opposite reciprocal? You have to think. The opposite of a positive 4 is a negative 4. The opposite of a positive 39 is a negative 39. The opposite of negative 14 is a positive 14. That is what we mean by opposites. Now, let's think about reciprocal. When we talk about reciprocal, a lot of you notice reciprocal, or you reference reciprocal as your teacher saying flip it. But the proper term is reciprocal. So if I have 2/3, 2 in my numerator and 3 in my denominator, when I find the reciprocal of this, it's going to be 3/2. Okay? Now, the basis of that is anytime I have a fraction, to find the reciprocal, in turn, what we do, flip it. I turn it over. The reciprocal, meaning that once I multiply these two numbers, they will cancel out. 2 goes into 2, 3 into 3, giving me 1. So that's the definition behind reciprocal. Once I multiply a number by its reciprocal, it should give me 1. So let's go back to our perpendicular slope as that refers to us. In my example, now, when we're talking about slope of a line referencing perpendicular, remember, I'm looking for the opposite reciprocal. And we went over opposite by definition. So if I have y is equal to 2/3 x plus 6, let's take a look at that. Y is equal to 2/3 x plus 6. If I'm looking for the perpendicular slope, I now have to think, keeping in mind y is equal to mx plus b. This guiding me as my current slope. So if this is my current slope, I'm looking for the opposite. Right now, this is a positive function. This slope is positive. So opposite of a positive is going to give me a, correct, negative. Opposite of a positive is going to give me a negative. So in this case, the slope of this line is going to be, let me move this up some so you can see. The slope of this line is going to be a negative because it's the opposite. And now I have to take the reciprocal. And the reciprocal terms that you're used to, I'm going to take this here and flip it. That will now give me 3/2. So this is my given equation. Y is equal to 2/3 x plus 6. If I were looking for the perpendicular slope of that line, the perpendicular slope of that line would be m is equal to a negative 3/2. I hope that cleared up that situation for you, and we can move further. Now, let's take a look at if I have this problem. I want you to follow with me. Excuse me, I'm turning. Okay. Let's take a look at this graph. Let's say I have this graph right here, and I'm saying the directions tell me to find the equation of that line. There's some things that I need to start thinking about. First of all, in finding the equation of that line, let's look at it. Is the line going up or down from left to right? Okay, now the line is going down from left to right. So automatically seeing that the line is going down from left to right, that indicates a type of slope. That automatically should indicate a negative slope because the line is declining. So that's one thing I already know here. I know that I'm going to have a negative slope. Now, let's write our slope-intercept form. Y is equal to mx plus b. How do I begin developing this line? There are many ways that you can go about, but again, we are using the slope-intercept form. So first thing I need to identify is what is the slope of this actual graph. So I'm going to try to bring this up for you a little bit so it can be a lot closer. In finding the slope of this graph, I want to find I can find it from finding points on the graph. I'm trying to find it as straight as possible so you can see it. So what I'm going to do is I'm looking for a point where I can find my x and my y coordinates easily, where they're not in the middle, where they're right on the point. So if I look here, right here, that gives me what? X value is 4 and my y value is -3. So that would be my first point. My coordinate point here will give me 4, -3. So that's my point. Now, how do I find the slope? Ironically, I want to use that same point right here. In finding the slope from the graph, if I find the slope, I should be able to use the rise over run that we've learned. The change in x, the change in y over the change in x, excuse me. So I'm going to look right here. I find this point. It's on the line. And I find this other point here that's also on the line, and I can read the coordinates, and they are whole numbers. So let's go. From this point here, how many do I go down? We draw this little triangle. I know some of you have seen this before. You want to make a triangle. So I've made that triangle. So now what I need from that triangle are the legs. So how many did I go down? 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's 4 in this space here. And how many did I go over to the right? Let's count. 1, 2, 3. So that's 3 here. There's something that we're used to, the term rise over run. So let's take a look at it. Remember, my graph is going what? Down. So that indicates to me that my slope automatically is going to be negative. So let's go with my rise over run, because this is something that we're used to seeing. Now, how many did I rise? Not necessarily rise, but how many did I move on the y-axis? My movement on the y-axis said from my initial point 4, -3, I went down 4 spaces. And then I went to the right, how many spaces? 3. The movement on the y-axis was down, so that indicates a negative slope. So here my slope is -4/3. So now I have my 2 things that I kind of need that will get me through. I have y is equal to mx plus b. I need to solve my b because that's missing. I see here I have my slope and I have this point. What can I do to find b? Okay, I can go back into this equation and plug in the information or substitute the information that I have. In substituting, I will find, I'm going to replace my x and y. So I have -3 is equal to what? My slope is -4/3 times my x value is, and my b, I still don't know yet. Okay, so when I multiply all of this out, that's going to give me -3 is equal to a -4 times a -4 is -16/3 plus b. Now, this here brings me to a, what, one-step equation? Because what do I now need to do with this? I need to go ahead and isolate the b. I need to solve for b on its own. How do I solve for b? I have a -16/3. I want to remove that, and the only way to remove a -16/3 is to what? Use the reciprocal. I'm sorry, use the opposite. And the opposite of a -16/3 is a +16/3. Good job. So I'm going to say I'm going to add +16/3 to both sides. That the -16/3 and the +16/3 is going to cancel out. So that's going to give me b is equal to a -3 plus 16/3. I'm just going to run through this component rather quickly for those of us who are not sure. I need to make this into a denominator. This this whole number, I need to turn it into a fraction. So I need a number where I can have a denominator of 3. That will give me -9/3 plus 16/3. I know I did that really fast, but how many times does 3 go into -9? 9 is divisible by 3 how many times? 3 times. 3 times 1, -1, give me a -3. So that's how I got that. Okay? Beautiful. So now, when I combine these like terms right here, these integers right here, I'm going to get a -9 plus a +16 is going to give me, got it? That will give me 7, correct? Thank you. And that will be a +7/3 is equal to b. So now I have the two things that I need to go back in and plug in my equation. I have my slope is a -4/3. And then I have my b is 7/3. So now I come and I say y is equal to mx plus b. My y is equal to -4/3 x. And my slope is equal to 7/3. So that would be the equation of that line. What if I needed to do the perpendicular? I needed a perpendicular slope. A perpendicular slope, remember, was going to be the what of the given? It's going to be the opposite reciprocal. And the opposite of a negative is a positive. So this would have been a +3/4. And my b is going to be 7/3. That would have been, excuse me, the perpendicular equation to that line. So there you have your measurement, your equations using slope-intercept form on how to find the equation of a line from the graph. With that being said, we are going to end this video and you will have another segment coming up. Thank you again.